I wasn't raised in a religious household. My mother wasn't very religious, and my father was a complete atheist and almost anti-religion in a lot of ways. He was one of those people who believed that all of the world's problems were caused by religion. For all intents and purposes, religion was like banned in our household, really, to be honest. So my father was, he had a lot of fear and therefore a lot of anger. And myself, being the oldest of 3 children, and my mother as well, we took a lot of that. We took the brunt of his anger. I couldn't say exactly when, but at some point in my life, I really took on that character of my father, and I became an incredibly angry child. When I was 15 years old, I remember my mother packed us up into her car and told us we were going for a vacation back to Thunder Bay, Ontario, where she's from. But by the end of the summer, she told us that we weren't going back home and that she was leaving my father because my father was too angry, he was too stressed out, he couldn't handle his children, and more or less placed the blame on us. Yeah, became a very, very destructive person. So all of a sudden, at 15 years old, I was taken away from all of my friends and meant to start over again in a small town, which was very difficult. Even though my relationship with my father wasn't a healthy one back then, for a child to be taken away from their father abruptly like that, it was a traumatizing experience. I was going to school at this small town school with a ton of violence, and it's also when I was first introduced to drugs and alcohol from other kids at school. I think I was getting to be quite a handful for my mother to deal with, so she put me on a plane and sent me back to Vancouver, and I lived with my father. He was never around. He never really had, but at that point, he wasn't even there to teach me anything about being a man. I continued to run around in the street and get in more and more trouble all the time, being brought home by police. As far as friends are concerned, I slowly lost all of them, one by one, as I got worse and worse into drug use, and the anger built up more and more. I just found myself on the verge of imploding. I'd moved out of my parents' household, was barely making it on my own. I had some good jobs here and there, which afforded me my lifestyle, but it was a completely unhealthy lifestyle. Relationships were a disaster for me. I still had incredible anger problems, even though I'd have stretches of happiness. None of it was real. If I'm perfectly honest, I would say that by the time I was in my 30s, I might have had some glimpse of believing in God, but only as someone that I could blame for how horrible my life was. Much like my father had directed his anger at my mother and myself, I was directing all of my anger at God by that point, and every other person that kind of came in my path, really. And I guess it all came to a head by the end of 2022. That was one of the darkest years of my life. I was ready to give up everything. I can't remember exactly when, but there was a point when I would start to hear people talking about Jesus and their relationship with God, and it started to move me. And I think at first it was because I didn't understand it, and I wish I had that. It just sounded so beautiful. I then started seeing someone, and this would have been November or December. I started seeing someone posting about the Bridge Church on Instagram. It just looked like such a happy, joyful group of people. I threw my hands up and I decided that I was going to go to the bridge on Sunday. And I guess that was the moment I decided that I couldn't do it anymore, and that I was going to go learn about Jesus. So January 1st, 2023 is when I came to the bridge, which happened to be a Sunday, and it also happened to be a day when everyone was taking Holy Communion, which I had never done. I found myself sitting among them, and I decided that I wanted to take communion. And so I'm sitting there with a piece of pita bread and a glass of cranberry juice. I just remember I was shaking so violently and uncontrollably. I could not stop. I knew from that moment that I was going to give up completely this idea that I could make my own way in life. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, as my shepherd, to follow his path that he had made for us, because I couldn't do it. I just thought of my life up to that day, just the disaster that it was. And this year has been easily the best year of my life. God has softened my heart. I just want so much to spread love, spread God's love as much as I can. I no longer feel the same anger that I used to feel. And accepting Jesus as my Lord and Savior, I understand that he died for me and that I don't need to be a slave to my sins. I don't need to be a slave to my addictions. I can leave them all for him. He sacrificed it all on the cross. He told me that I must die myself and take up my cross, and that if I follow his path, that there is eternal glory waiting for me. And I truly believe that.